Okay, I'm starting a video. I I want to give an introduction to the John Donne poems. When I post an assignment and it has 0 points associated with it, and it's just a batch of poetry, the assignment is to read the poetry. I want you to do that first, and then we'll have stuff to discuss. I'm going to give you discussion questions about the Donne poems. Unfortunately, I don't have a good way I can put them on a screen so I can see them, but you won't be able to see them. So what I want you to do is be looking at the Donne poems that I posted in Canvas as I give an introduction to them, because I'm going to give you a little bit of background information. But I really want you to dig into the poems and try to figure out what they mean. The first one is The Flea. And stanza 1 has important clues about what the speaker of the poem might be after. He talks about how little that which thou deniest me is. What he's really talking about is a flea that's bitten him and one other person. And inside the flea, their blood is mingled. He's using the flea as a metaphor for something that he wants from the person to whom he's speaking. He says, you know that can't be said, the mingling of blood inside of a flea, a sin, a shame, a loss of maidenhead. That gives you a huge clue about what the speaker's after. If you don't know all the words in the line I just read, look them up. It's quite explicit about what the speaker wants. And he seems to grouch off about the fact that the flea gets to do the fun stuff without wooing. If you don't know what wooing is, look woo up. That's courtship and going on dates, playing games, having fun together. He wants to skip all of that, and he's using the flea as a metaphor for how insignificant it would be to skip all of that. But in between stanza 1 and stanza 2, the person to whom he's speaking makes a gesture that's really important. She doesn't say anything, but you can tell, you can infer by looking at the first 2 lines of stanza 2 what he wants. Oh, stop! 3 lives and 1 flea spared. 3 lives, it's like, okay, what lives is he talking about? He said he's in the flea, she's in the flea, and the flea counts as a life, and maybe they made a baby together inside the flea, because he's using the flea for a metaphor for fun stuff that he wants to do. I don't know if that adds up to 3. That's an important question, because 3 comes up again and again. I'm not sure that the way the speaker counts is actually accurate. But she makes a gesture. Stop. Don't do that to the 3 lives of the flea. Don't do that. I'll make the flea a big deal instead of something insignificant. So he says that this is where we got together. This is where we got married. Inside the flea, we were united. We consummated our relationship, and therefore we must have. It's a big deal. Your parents were there. They don't like me much, but they were there. You were there. And we were all cloistered. Cloister's an interesting word in this context. I suggest you look up cloister. But he says, this is a big deal. Don't crush the flea. It's not insignificant, like I said. It's our whole life together. And that means you shouldn't crush the flea, because the flea is his metaphor for what he really wants. And he has to make it a big deal in order to get her to stop what she's threatening to do. You say it was just a flea, but it's not, because you're in there and I'm in there, so you'd be committing suicide. you'd be killing me, and you'd be killing the baby we made together, and kind of as an oblique reference to the Holy Trinity, you'd be committing all kinds of sins, but they don't add up to 3. And if you look at the beginning of the 3rd stanza, you can see what she makes of his argument, because he says, "Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence." Well, ask yourself what she did. And then he says, okay, well, you think the flea's no big deal, right? That's what I was saying in stanza 1. If it's no big deal, and being bitten by a flea is insignificant, what I'm asking for is insignificant. Let's just go do it. Question: who gets what they want from this game that the speaker started by using the flea as a metaphor for he wants sex and he wants it now. She wants courtship. She could slap him and walk away the moment he said what he did in the first stanza. He doesn't do that. She doesn't slap him and walk away. She doesn't say, yes, let's do it. She plays his game, uses his metaphor, and beats him. But it's a game. It's like what you do on a date. So the question is, who actually gets what they want out of this poem? I think it's complicated. And you say, well, what the speaker wants is obvious, and he's just going to keep on playing a game in order to get what he wants. But playing a game is like going out on a date, and the question is, who gets what they want? Okay. The next poem, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. Valediction is well speaking for, in this context, no grief over separation. The first stanza makes it seem like the poem's about death, but I don't think it is. As blah, 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 and then look at the stanza 2. So let us melt. The first stanza is an analogy. As X is to Y, so A is to B. So the first stanza is an analogy. As virtuous, look it up. Virtuous men on their deathbeds are not all wrought up with grief over what's happening, and neither are their friends. They're sad, but they're not overly consumed with grief. And the word virtuous is a key word. If the men are virtuous who are dying and their friends are virtuous, question, do they separate forever when the guy on his deathbed dies? Or do they meet in a better place later? What is the meaning of separation? Is it that you never see people again? Or is it that you do, and your relationship grows and deepens because of the separation? And speaker says, so let us melt. We're not necessarily one of us is dying, but we don't need to make a big production about being out of physical contact with each other. It would profane our joys to tell the laity of our love. Look up laity. Look what it means. We don't need to do what people, what people do in the halls during passing periods. They're out there groping each other because they can't stand to be apart for 50 minutes. And so they're late to class every time because they have to have the physical contact or the relationship's not real. That's what this poem's about, because it says all that stuff, that physical stuff, misses the point. The poem has an idea in it of the earth is the center of the universe, and everything goes. This is what people believed in. Most people believed in Donne's time. everything in the heavens went around the earth, sun, moon, stars, planets, and the higher you go, the closer you are to heaven. So an earthquake seems like a big deal, but trepidation of the spheres, which is like stars, have human fate written in them. You can't feel that because it's higher than an earthquake, but it means something deeper and more profound. And people who are all caught up in an earthquake don't realize that the stars are far more important. People whose relationships are based entirely on physical contact cannot admit absence. They can't stop groping because their relationship is built on physical contact. And if that contact stops, they lose what the basis of their relationship is. It's all physical. The speaker says, we're not like that. Our love is so much refined that we ourselves don't know what it is, but we're connected at a higher level. So when we separate, we care less about the physical stuff that gets missed. We care less about eyes, lips, hands, all the stuff that lovers do. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach. We're not breaking apart when I have to leave. We're actually growing because what connects us is a higher quality. And I need something to illustrate what this is. Hold on a second. Okay, so the speaker of the poem says, our souls are connected at the top like a compass. And he's not talking about the kind of compass that points to the north and shows you direction. That's not the kind of compass he means. He means the kind of compass that you use in math class that's got a connecting point on the top, and one pointy thing goes in the middle of a page, and you can draw a little circle or a big circle because there's a pencil attached to the other end. You know what kind of compass I'm talking about? That's what he's talking about. And he's using that to describe a relationship. The fixed point doesn't look like it's moving, but actually the center is always oriented in motion, oriented to the part that goes around in a circle. They're connected at a level that's above physical contact. Their souls are connected. And she's at the center, and he's always, I don't know how to describe it. They're directly connected to each other because their relationship is spiritual, is higher, connected at the heart, the mind, whatever you want to call it. It's in the metaphor of a compass is a really interesting one. I may seem to go a long way, but the further I go, the more we have to lean into the part that connects us, which is the top. So if I'm making a big circle, we both have to lean into the connection part, which is the spiritual part, the higher part of the relationship. The further away I go, the more we lean into what connects us. We're not losing our relationship because it's not based on physical contact. It's based on something higher. So if I have to go, I'm always going in a circle because I'm really always going back home. and we're connected at a level that's higher than anybody can see. It's a connection at this level of soul. And he always comes home. I'm just giving you info to help with the study questions. The Holy Sonnets, Death Be Not Proud, you can read that and figure out, I think, fairly quickly that the speaker is trying to show contempt for death. And death is always something that appears in literary works, in movies and TV shows and cartoons. Death is a skeletal figure with a black cloak and a scythe that they uses to harvest souls. But the speaker says to that personified being, don't be all full of yourself because you're not a big deal. You can't kill me. And listen, there's nothing to fear from you. I go to sleep, that's a good thing. I rest, that's a good thing. Those are what death is. Death is rest, death is sleep. That's just a better version of those. Nothing to fear. The people who are taken the soonest are allowed to go to heaven because they get the good stuff earlier than others who have to endure human life for a long time. Death, you're not threatening anybody. You are a slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men. When you think about how each of those things would control death. If everything's fated, death's like a FedEx guy. Death just comes to collect a soul that fate decided, maybe at the beginning of time, fate decided when that soul was ready to be harvested. The death's just following orders. Death's a slave. Or everything's random. It's totally chance. There's no fate at all. Well, then death is still just, he's not in control. It's like the butterfly effect. Somebody steps on a lizard 1,000 years ago, and that creates a ripple in time that affects when you get hit by a bus. And so death just comes to collect a soul that was readied by random actions. Death's a slave. Or kings have the power to say, off with their heads. Kings can order executions. Desperate people can kill themselves. Death just comes to harvest souls that other people or forces have decided are ready. Death doesn't decide. Death's just a messenger, an errand boy. So that's not threatening. Death hangs out with poison, war, and sickness. But they control death too. So why swellest thou then? If you read that as a rhetorical question, why are you making a big deal? Death, you're nothing. If that's a rhetorical question, and a rhetorical question is like, you come in at 3 in the morning and a voice rings out, do you know what time it is? Are you supposed to say, well, yeah, it's 3:15? Or, if it's a rhetorical question, are you supposed to acknowledge the fact that you were out way too late and say, I'm sorry? If it's a rhetorical question, it's putting death down. We win. We go to heaven eventually, and death is the last enemy to die. That's actually a line from 1 Corinthians 15. The last enemy to die will be death. That's after Judgment Day. That's in a letter that Paul wrote. So there's a way to read this where death is not a threat. I want you to be very cautious. Donne is complex. And look at that rhetorical question, why swellest thou then? What if it's not a rhetorical question? What if it's a real question? Why are you bigger? I told you all the reasons why you were insignificant. Why are you bigger? Why are you more ominous? Why are you more threatening? Why didn't my put downs work? Listen, if that stuff didn't work, I've got one more for you. Death, I'm going to give you the death penalty because all that other stuff didn't work. Now we have an interesting paradox. Death got bigger as the speaker said death was little. So the speaker says, death, I'm giving you the death penalty. Well, if death really is nothing to be afraid of, is the death penalty something that death should be afraid of? The last line becomes something that's not a threat at all, if the rest of the poem is true. Death's no big deal. Death shouldn't be afraid of death. Or death should be afraid of death, and the rest of the poem is just whistling in the dark. But it creates a paradox if you read that question in the third to the last line as not a rhetorical question, but a real question. Why are you getting bigger as I put you down? Well, I'll give you the death penalty. That creates a paradox. That takes you into really interesting territory. Holy Sonnet number 9 does the same thing. The speaker says, listen, all this other poisonous stuff kills people. They don't go to hell for murder. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil in Genesis, the one tree that God told Adam and Eve not to eat from. Well, they ate from it. And so the speaker's saying that tree ought to go to hell too, because it condemned all humanity to be mortal. Goats get to be lecherous, look it up, and they don't go to hell for that. Serpents get to envy people, that's from Genesis 2. They don't go to hell. Why do I go to hell? Well, he says why in the next line. I can have intention, I can have reason, I have free will, I have consciousness, and that other stuff doesn't. So he kind of answers his own question. I can be damned when other stuff can't because I have free will. But why should free will make sins that are otherwise equal more heinous, worse for me? Why do I get damned if I do the kind of stuff that, if I'm like a lecherous goat, if I go around doing bad stuff all the time? And God, if you're really all powerful, you should rearrange the universe so that everybody just automatically goes to heaven. Mercy's easy and glorious. God, let everybody off the hook. Why don't you do that? That's blasphemy. The speaker commits a sin within the poem. And she asks a question afterwards. Who am I that dare dispute with thee, O God? That is another question that's critically important, because if it's a rhetorical question, the answer is I'm nothing. I just committed a horrible sin because I questioned the way God arranged the universe. That's not something I should be doing. So who am I? If it's a rhetorical question, the answer is a worm. I'm a worm. I'm nothing. Please take me as insignificant, as humble, as little as possible. Make a heavenly Lethean flood. Lethe's the river of forgetfulness. If you've seen the movie Hercules, the Disney version, when Hercules dives into that river to get Meg, that's the river of Lethe that makes you forget who you are. And he's saying, I'm full of grief for having committed blasphemy, and now I'm asking for forgiveness. In all my tears are evidence that I'm asking for forgiveness. Some people pray every night that God will remember them. What I pray for, and I know it's impossible, is that God will forgive me, forget the blasphemy I just committed. But what if the line that's critically important is read as a non-rhetorical question? Who am I that dare dispute with thee, O God? What if it's a real question? Why do I ask questions to get me into trouble? We're created in God's image. We have free will. Why does that always lead to questions that are dangerous? If it's a non-rhetorical question, it's asking something really profound about the nature of free will. And it makes the rest of the poem very different. And when you think about how it makes it different, if he's really asking, what is the nature of a being whose natural questioning leads into an act of what's considered blasphemy? If we're designed in God's image, why do our minds go to bad places? What tricks us? Is it free will itself? Is that a gift? If it's a gift, why do we misuse it? Why are we designed that way? Is it our design that gets us into trouble? What is the nature of free will that roams always into dangerous questions? Okay, so I'm going to post study questions after you've watched this video. In order to verify that you've watched the video, I can tell from Canvas when you go in and watch, it shows the date time, but I'm going to ask that you make one comment per poem. It can be a sentence that describes something significant that I talked about for each poem. And you're going to post that. When I post the video, your evidence of viewing it is that you write a sentence that describes something important in each poem that we did. That's the evidence that you watched the video, and I'll give you credit for it when I do it. I will also post study questions. I had a quiz, but the people I do face-to-face did so poorly on it, and I think I'll just do with the study questions. You'll do better on the study questions. You'll learn more. I will post those soon, but I want you to watch this video first. All right, thanks.